We got some great weather, and summer started, I think, for all the kids at this point. And so I dressed accordingly. And I bet nobody noticed, because my wife didn't notice this morning, and she laughed at me when I came out of the house. I bet nobody noticed that my pants are really wrinkled. So, well, it could be, or maybe I should start hanging them up. But I once took an iron and thought I would iron my shirt while I was wearing it. I learned pretty quick that that was not. There's a reason why we have ironing boards. So don't iron your shirt or your pants when you're wearing it. So today we're talking about Jesus' trial and a little bit about Judas' suicide and then his crucifixion and being buried and guarded. So actually kind of a lot of material. But and one thing as I was reading through this, I kind of got hung up on the trial part, and just a lot of thoughts going through my head about Jesus being on trial, and just kind of try to get my thoughts straight, and so you guys can kind of be on the same page. You know, they really didn't have anything on Jesus. You know, we know with history's hindsight, he's innocent, and you know, and that's part of the plan. But they had to get him to the cross. You know, they had to crucify him. So as you're reading through this, you know, it's kind of interesting that you're looking at it, you're like, so what do they got on the guy? Well, that's the point. They don't have anything on the guy. But they have to make it sound like they have something on the guy so that they can get him crucified, they can get him killed. And really, when you read through it, it almost looks like, at first, it almost looks like, is the Bible kind of messing up here, you know, if you just sort of read it face value, you know, because you're like, where's the punchline? And but that's the point. The punchline is that he's innocent. And so we're going to we'll start here in Luke 23, and through, let's see, we'll go through about verse 25. Does anybody want to read that?
1 through 25?
Yeah, 1 through 25.
Then the whole assembly got up and brought him before Pilate. They began to accuse Jesus, asserting, "We found this man misleading and perverting our nation, forbidding us to pay taxes to Caesar, and claiming that he himself is Christ, a king." So Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered them, "It is just as you say." Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no guilt in this man." But they were insistent, and he said, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout Judea, from Galilee even as far as here in Jerusalem." When Pilate heard it, he asked whether this man was a Galilean. And when he learned that he belonged to the jurisdiction of Herod, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly pleased. He had wanted to see him for a long time because of what he had heard about him, and was hoping to see some sign done by him. And he questioned him at some length, but Jesus made no reply. The chief priests and the scribes were standing there, continually accusing him heatedly. And Herod with his soldiers, after treating him with contempt and mocking and ridiculing him, dressed him in a gorgeous robe and sent him back to Pilate. Now that very day, Herod and Pilate became friends with each other. Before this, they had been enemies. Pilate summoned the chief priests and the rulers of the people, and said to them, "You brought this man before me as one who corrupts and incites the people to rebellion. After examining him before you, I have found no guilt in this man regarding the charges which you make against him. No, nor has Herod, for he sent him back to us, and indeed he has done nothing to deserve death.
It's interesting. I couldn't help but notice a contrast to, and one thing the Bible always, or not necessarily a contrast, but just a similarity. The Bible always kind of, it shows us who we are. We haven't changed as a society and people in many ways. And it's something that I often go back to in all these lessons. And so we see them, they take him in front of Pilate, then they take him in front of Herod, then they take him back in front of Pilate, and they're like, I'm not seeing any guilt in this guy. What do you want us to do? And then they're like, release Barabbas, the murderer or whatever. When do we see that in society today? We see this mob rule, right, where people get all worked up, and then we've seen it in our society in the last few years, where people are more likely to defend somebody who's criminal, and then call out people that are trying to do right, and say that they're somehow wrong. That's kind of the world we're living in today. And any one of us can fall kind of prey to that, maybe in some small level, with people that would say all kinds of things about us, whether it be abortion or whatever. If we speak out a little bit about something, then we're taken out of context, and we're turned and made to look evil, or the church is made to look evil, to further an end, in our society. But then we see in the text, Herod wants to see Jesus, and Jesus doesn't really say much. All Herod, I think it says, he wanted to see him. Basically, it sounds like he was curious. And he's like, hey, I've been wanting to talk to this guy here. He can do some miracles and stuff, and it's kind of amazing. And people are like, oh, that's kind of neat. Maybe he'll come in here and he'll do some miracles for me, and it'll be kind of interesting. He's not really interested in, it doesn't sound like he's really interested in what Jesus has to say as much as he's curious. It's kind of a curiosity. And then at that point, Jesus doesn't do anything. He doesn't try to prove himself. One commentator said, that's obviously part of it, in that, had he done something that would have made Herod, astounded, would he have tried harder to make sure Jesus is not killed, of course. And so it just sort of, it's kind of all part of the plan. So he sends him back and to Pilate. So let's see, let's turn to Matthew. Talk about Judas here for a minute. Matthew 27. Any comments on what we just talked about? Anything jumps out at you? Let's see, 27, we're going to go like 27, first 10 verses, so I'll read it here. Early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people came to the decision to put Jesus to death. They bound him, they led him away, and handed him over to Pilate, to the governor. When Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned the 30 silver coins to the chief priests and the elders. I have sinned, he said, for I have betrayed an innocent blood. What is that to us? They replied. That's your responsibility. So Judas threw the money into the temple and left. Then he went away and hanged himself. The chief priest picked up the coins and said, "It is against the law to put put this into the treasury, since it is blood money. So they decided to use the money to buy the potter's field as a burial place for foreigners. That is why it has been called the field of blood to this day. Then what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. They took the 30 silver coins, the price per set on him by the people of Israel, and they used them to buy the potter's field as the Lord commanded me. So we already see Jesus, or Judas, just fairly early in the morning. He's already, he's feeling pretty guilty. And he tries to give the money back, but they're like, you're the one who took the money, almost like, never mind that we gave you the money, that we helped set this up, but, we can't take it back. That's dirty money, It's all yours. It's all on you, buddy. And you already see, to me, that kind of shows, like, they kind of know what they're doing. And probably a little part of them's like, yeah, we know we're not right, but we don't care because we've got an agenda and we're going to push through it. And, and so ultimately Judas, hangs himself. Questions, comments on Judas? Right, exactly. It just shows the hypocrisy of it, right? Because like, oh, well, we have all these rules. We can't put this money back, right? Because we have these rules that we have to abide by. Yeah, all through this, you see the hypocrisy of what they're doing, and so let's go to John 18. I think this is right. Find the correct verses here. So one of the things, John 18 has more of the conversation with Jesus and Pilate, but interestingly enough, looking for the correct verse. But anyway, in the text we see that they brought him pretty. This stuff was happening at night. They brought Jesus to Pilate in the morning, and more on kind of that hypocrisy. They show up and they're like, Pilate's like, well, come in and let's talk about this. No. We can't go into your house because then we'll be unclean for being a Gentile's house, right? We've got to eat Passover later, so we got to get this done before dinner. Basically, is kind of what they're saying. When I look at some of this stuff, and again, it's like we want to remain clean as we figure out how to condemn and kill an innocent man. We want to continue to be good in all this. There's this constant kind of theme that we see. And so in verse 28 in John 18, Jesus before Pilate. Then the Jews led Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanliness, the Jews did not enter the palace. They wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" Look, they kind of inconvenience Pilate in a way. It's like he's got to come out. It's early in the morning. Can you imagine I can't imagine dragging the governor out, driving to Bexley, and being like, hey, Mike, come out here. We need to talk to you. And he comes out in his slippers, fuzzy slippers. What? Hey, we got a guy here, and we want to, he's guilty of all this stuff, and we want you to do something with him. And so I can imagine, just as a governor, just as a political leader, it had to be a little bit annoying for him. And so, verse 30, if he were not a criminal, they replied, he would not have handed him over to you. Pilate said, take him yourselves and judge him by your own law. And then they said, but we have no right to execute anyone, because at that time, even though they did occasionally execute people when they could get away with it, apparently it was basically the Romans let them self-govern their territories, but they held like execution was kind of like still the job of the Romans, right? They didn't want executions to be, regularly practiced by the local governments or the people that the Rome had conquered. But so anyway, so I think that's part of what's going on here. Does that sound about right? But we have no right to execute anyone, the Jews objected. So verse 32, this happened so that the words Jesus had spoken, indicating the kind of death he was going to die, would be fulfilled. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him. So now he's asked Jesus to come into the palace so he can kind of talk to him, probably in a little more quiet space. Are you the king of the Jews? Jesus replies, is that your own idea? Or did others talk to you about me? Do you think I am a Jew? Pilate replied. It was your people and your chief priest who handed you over to me. What is it you have done? Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But now my kingdom is from another place. And then Pilate says, you are a king then. Jesus answered, you are right in saying I am a king. In fact, for the reason I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. And then Pilate says, what is truth? With this, he sent out again to the Jews and said, I find no basis for a charge against him. But it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews? They shouted back, no, not him. Give us Barabbas. Now Barabbas had spoken, or had taken part, now Barabbas had taken part in a rebellion. So we see, again, we see this thought process where they've come on a day when, it's Passover. There's a lot of extra, and this kind of hits home to me, because since it's Passover, there's more soldiers and things in town because there's more people in town. They're celebrating a religious holiday. They want to make sure that, the peace is kept. Why there's a lot more folks in town. And so they brought in more troops. And so at other times, maybe they might try to get away with just stoning somebody themselves or whatever. But there's a lot of eyes watching, so they're trying to do everything by the book, so to speak. But they've already sort of crafted this, this idea. They know that there's this tradition. They know that Pilate can release somebody, but yet they've kind of already figured it out. And then you got a guy who's called a murderer in one place, and in this part it says now Barabbas had taken part in a rebellion, which is another thing that's kind of ironic, because it's kind of what they're worried about with Jesus, that he's going to incite something, but yet they're willing to, it's ironic that this guy is maybe already taken part in some things like that.
Well, it again just points back to the hypocrisy, because it's not really what they're worried about, right? That's
Yep.
kind of what they want, is to be free of Rome, which was always interesting to me, because I always wondered, why are they calling this murder? Well, it's not quite as simple as he's just a murderer. He probably just killed Romans. He was rebelling against the Roman government, and so
Right.
he's probably a hero of the people, right? Which is what they want Jesus to do, to some extent. Not Jesus himself. Or the Pharisees don't want Jesus to be the leader, but they want freedom from Rome, and so they want this real physical kingdom again, right? And so they call out Barabbas instead of Jesus, because they want the hero who's fighting back against Rome, and not the person who's telling them the truth of God.
That's an interesting point. And yeah, I mean, it's just at every level it's a setup, and they've thought about it. And then I like where Pilate says, "What is truth?" So here's a guy, he's kind of stuck. And isn't that what we in today's world, we sit around and we watch the news and we're like, what happened to truth? Where did truth go? And here's, and they've switched it kind of from the local sort of religious rules and stuff amongst them, and they've switched it to politics, right? They went to the politician to get their out, and then he's going, man, it's just continues to not add up. But he also knows that he doesn't want an insurrection, and he doesn't, as things get more heated, he wants to keep things calm as well. And so, they have this tradition or rule about releasing a prisoner on Passover, and that's the way it's going to get done. I'll read a little bit here in chapter 19. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him again and again, saying, "Hail, O King of the Jews!" And they struck him in the face. Once more Pilate came out and said to the Jews, "Look, I'm bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify, crucify." But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." The Jews insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God." And so there you finally have the blasphemy. That's where they're sort of hanging this on. They've said some other things that weren't true. I think we read a verse where it talks about him. He's talking about not paying your taxes or whatever. Well, we know that's exactly the opposite of what Jesus said. So again, you see this thing that persists in society today. Somebody makes a claim, but their sound bites edited or whatever, and then the masses will say, "No, they said this," and then we see it. It reminds me somewhat of our cancel culture today, and it's kind of how it kind of shows that evil of lying. Pilate, what is truth? So Pilate's struggling with, he's got somebody on one side, and he probably knows these folks maybe aren't the most honest folks. And then he's got the conversations he's had and what he's observed. In verse 8 of 19, when Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have the power to either free you or to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." And so right there he's saying, it's not your power, it's God's power that is basically given to you, or letting your power be something. And then he said, "Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jews kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend to Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." So then they're thinking, man, are we going to get this guy crucified before dinner or what? So they're like, but hey, he's challenging Caesar. Now they're going to take a shot. Now they really go into the political realm. They're failing on their end to convince Pilate, but now they're going to go totally into the politics of it and say, he claims to be king, so he therefore opposes Caesar. When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat on the judge's seat at the palace, known as the stone pavement, which in Aramaic in Gabbatha, it was the day of preparation of Passover week, about the 6th hour. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, take him away, crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priests answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. So you kind of wonder, at that point, oh, we have no king but Caesar. Going back to your point, it's like, that's not really what they wanted, But when it was politically expedient, they were more than willing to say, our king is Caesar. Yeah, you're on the right path now. So they're compromising their morality again and their own convictions to try to get this done. So then moving on. So the soldiers took charge of Jesus, carrying his own cross. He went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. Here they crucified him, and with 2 others, one on each side of him, Jesus in the middle. Pilate had a notice prepared and fastened to the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read this sign, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and the sign was written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. The chief priests of the Jews protested to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews, but that this man claimed to be the King of the Jews." Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." Kind of tells me he's pretty much tired of them. You're done. You got what you want. Just get out of here. When the soldiers crucified Jesus, they took his clothes, dividing them into 4 shares, one for each of them, with the undergarment remaining. This garment was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. "Let's not tear it," they said to another. "Let's decide who will get it. This will happen when this happened that the scripture might be fulfilled, which said, 'They divided my garments among them and cast lots for my clothing.'" So this is what the soldiers did. Let's see. So if we go back to Matthew 27, follow along in the lesson plan. Matthew 27. Let's see. I'll be down here in verse 32. As they were going out, they met a man named, anybody want to do it? Cyrene. I just looked up how to pronounce it so I wouldn't look foolish, and then I forgot. Named Simon, and from Cyrene, named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall, but after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, and I've seen where that probably had something in it, the gall or whatever, to help dull the pain. And so you see Jesus not wanting to be in that, any kind of different state of mind other than where he's at. I can only imagine. I didn't look that up, but it might, probably kind of like a drug. When they crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots, and sitting down there, they kept watch over him there. Above the head place was written the charge against him: "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." The two robbers were crucified with him, one on the left and one on the right. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their head and saying, you who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law and the elders mocked him. He saved others, they said, but he can't save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let him rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, "I am the Son of God." In the same way, the robbers who were crucified with him heaped insults on him as well. So then, verse 50. Then, of course, after all this suffering, he said, and when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks split. The tombs broke open, and the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs, and after Jesus' resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." Many women were there watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. So verse 57, as evening approached, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate ordered that it be given to him. Joseph took the body, wrapped in a clean linen cloth, and placed it in his own new tomb that he had cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and others were sitting there across from the tomb. The next day, the one after preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. "Sir," they said, "we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, 'After 3 days I will rise again.' So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise, his disciples may come and steal the body and tell the people that he has been raised from the dead. This last description will be worse than the first, or deception will be worse than the first." "Take a guard," Pilate answered. "Go make the tomb as secure as you know how." So they went and made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting the guard. So, so we see then that they place him in a tomb and they post a guard, so that, they think they can keep his body from being stolen by men. And somehow prevent what he said from happening. So somehow I got through all the material. Questions, comments? Mark?
Thing that always strikes me when we read through these is how different we might have told the story if we were writing it. So, when it comes to the crucifixion itself, all it says is, and they crucified him. And because it's so central to our faith, we studied it all our lives, and we have a picture in mind of what that looks like. You know, we would have said, you know, they nailed his feet, they nailed his hands, they laid him down across it. All it says is they crucified him. No other details given. There's lots of details about other things going on around it, but it's just crucified him. And then the other thing, a little bit earlier, the Jews obviously they want this to happen, but they don't want to do it
Right.
because they know they'd be in trouble with crowds. And if they had done the execution, it wouldn't have been crucifixion. The Jews did not crucify. That was a Roman thing.
Yep.
So they would have stoned them. That's how they executed people. It's a crucifixion because they talked the Romans into doing it. But it's really them.
Right.
They want. Pilate doesn't want to do it. He just gets his arm twisted
Yeah.
doing it. So there's a lot of fascinating things.
It really is when you start breaking it down and you really start looking at all the different parts of it. I mean, of course, this is the central story, right, for us. And but it really is. You know, you look at John's account and you kind of get the bigger picture where, you know, all this stuff is going. Come on inside. Let me talk to you. And if you're watching the movie, you might think, you know, you don't know how it ends. You might think, hey, this guy's sympathetic. He might have a chance. Our hero might have a chance of getting out of this, right? You know, and you see a very kind of detailed conversation there. You feel like when, at least I felt like reading that, you know, you kind of know what the conversation is. And but then it is interesting, you know, it was kind of a given what crucifixion was when they wrote this. They didn't have to, you know, anybody that was around in that time period for at least a couple hundred years was going to understand what it meant by Roman crucifixion. That's all you got to say on that. You know, and then we study it because it's not familiar necessarily in our culture. And we study what it means, and we make movies about, you know, about it, and to try to illustrate it because we want to see it. We want to try to maybe at some level feel it a little bit more, and not just look at it on the page. And so yeah, but they knew what it was. But then, you know, the other interesting things about the books of the Bible is if I go to just a crash scene or whatever, I'm handling some kind of little crime or whatever, and making a report about it, I take statements from people. I take statements from you and you and you and person coming down the steps out there, and then I go through and I look at those statements and I look, where do these things match up? Because every now and then somebody's going to say something completely off the wall, and it's like, well, I know that didn't happen. I don't know why they said that or whatever, but inevitably, regardless if somebody's the one that got hit or got victimized or did the victimizing, there's consistencies between the statements, and you know, and that's one of the things I find interesting about, you know, even today our modern taking reports for things. You know, we look at these different accounts in the Bible, and we see all these, you know, we get the bigger picture because there's somebody's a little bit different perspective here and somebody's a little bit different perspective there, and then the picture is painted for us. And there's just so much stuff. I mean, I think there could be multiple classes on this section for sure. Well, I guess this is what we talk about every week because there's a lot to it, and it is very interesting in how the politics play into it and how all these different things play into it. It's not just simply, yeah, this guy went to the cross, and there was a lot that played into getting him there. And these people, they worked hard to do it. It wasn't just sort of flippant. They worked at it. They manipulated the system to make sure that it happened. So, anyway, thanks for your time. Have a great day.